Ryan's gonna make the motion first. Did you run about the motion?
Ryan's gonna make the motion.
You didn't miss it. Yeah, lost my trash can here. Donut, right?
Man, is this a cool deal or what? Is this a cool deal or what?
If you wish to speak this evening, please sign the yellow pad. There, it's in front of Mr. Wilson. Not to be confused with Mr. Wilson's yellow pad, but the one closer to the corner.
to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Let's pray. Father God, as we come before you tonight, we ask, Lord, that you give us wisdom and guidance as we go about the business of the city of Jackson. Lord, I pray for our city. I pray, God, that you'll continue to bless this town. I pray that you continue to bless its resources, bless our first responders, all those, Lord, who are endeavoring to help this city move forward. I ask your blessings on it all in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. I'd like to call this meeting of the Jackson City Council to order. I'd like to thank all the visitors who are with us this evening. I also would like to thank Mrs. Kuhn. Today was a little hectic getting some things together, and I do appreciate her work and what she's done today to try and get everything pulled together today. So I just want to say thank you. So we will have the call to order.
Foster.
Here.
Ondera.
Here.
Colby. Here. Peters.
Here.
Newkirk.
Here.
Crabtree.
Here.
Bach.
Here. Well, let me just say roll call, not
I
call
knew
to
what you
order.
meant.
Mayor Evans, I think we had a late scratch on the recognition.
No
So if you don't have anybody,
None tonight.
we'll move on to, we have one gentleman who is going to speak this evening, Mr. Berridge. So if you'd like to take the mic, we'll give you 3 minutes and do your thing.
Last fall, I came to council and said that I was going to ask for some grant funding to do some flood mitigation, hopefully to build a trail and look at building some ball fields. We started a project with ODNR's approval. They looked things over and said that now qualifies under their funding schedule. It used to be surface mining and reclamation only, but now we can consider the deep mines as well, in effect. We have, Mr. Schweikhammer Friday asked me if I would put something in front of you that would show a little bit about what we're proposing. This was our initial letter of intent that we sent to the state, saying it was our intention to ask for this funding. It covers a lot of things. There's a road, there's parking, there's lights, there's paved ball fields, there's a whole bunch more to go into. But anyway, the final application has to be sent in before the 16th of September. And one of the things that's required for the application is that we do a study of environmental assessment to see if there's no further action required or if it's something that we'd have to do a more detailed environmental impact statement. I checked with some consultants and I couldn't really get a clear answer on what that was going to cost, but I did find that the city can make application for an environmental assessment without charge and have the EPA will do it. They have funding for that. So I come to you with a request that you would support this project and help that it will advance the city of Jackson, the youth especially. And if we have questions, I'd like to set up a public meeting at some time that we can show a lot of what we propose after we make our final submission. But right now, do you have any questions? Would you be willing to give your support?
Council, questions?
Got my support.
Do we need something?
We've had a lot of input.
Yeah.
There have been concerns that maybe we could have some tennis courts and pickleball courts. Maybe we could have some better football fields, practice fields. There's a lot we can do, but the grant has two parts that we're asking for. At least 5 paved ball fields and then industrial development in the 25-acre location. Someone asked me earlier, who owns the land? Well, right now I do, but I'm selling it to the Port Authority. And the reason why I would give it to the Port Authority is because they have certain abilities that the city of Jackson and the economic development can make use of, that will allow us possibly to change some road access into that project area, breaking limited access right-of-way with the Department of Transportation. And ultimately, this disposition of this ground will be up to the people that are involved in the Port Authority and the city and economic development, how they want to break it up.
Okay. Mr. Schweikhammer.
Yeah, after Paul and I met last week, I also reached out and I invited Mr. Ball, who is president of the Port Authority, and Mr. Brady, Jackson County Economic Development Director. I would like to hear from each of them what their role in this is, since they are listed as one of the partners, or two of the three partners, the city being a third partner in this letter. And I would like to get input from them on their position, their accountability, responsibility, who they see, so that we're all hearing, because we've all met independently, but we've never all met as a group. We need to all understand who's on first and who's on second, and who's on the hook and who's not.
Third base.
So if I could, I'd like to hear from those two gentlemen.
You want to go first? Yeah, am I?
That's a hard act to follow, Pat. I mean, he already hit a home run, you know?
Well, and that's it, and Paul is a friend of mine, and I don't know, I mean, one of the things that Paul Berridge reminds me of, has anybody seen the movie Cool Hand Luke? So, no, Paul was, he's approached me about economic development projects for 20 years, and I've seen him put a lot of effort into things and then nothing come to fruition. I've seen him knock down several times. It kind of reminds me of Cool Hand Luke. He just keeps getting up. So this Ohio Mine Reclamation Fund is relatively new to me. I don't know the specific of it. Paul has done that. I mean, that was his profession prior to retirement. The Port Authority has limited risk at this point. And so when I evaluate businesses or propositions that I want to get into, what's our risk? At this point, the grant hasn't even been written. So for us to provide a letter of support is very easy. I remember, a fellow insurance, like Virgil Hamilton's office was underwater. Randy was on the school board when the bus garage flooded. Flood mitigation is a problem for the city of Jackson, and if this is a mechanism to address that, great. Also, I have two daughters that grew up playing ball different places. Can't play ball at Eddie Jones anymore. You just can't. So if Paul brings us a project that has the possibility of fixing some of these problems that I've seen in Jackson, Port Authority has no paid staff. My understanding, because we've gone through several iterations, and I respect Mr. Schweikhammer for bringing this, we don't know, quite frankly, what role we'll play. Paul's talked about owning the land. He's talked about some of the powers that, as a Port Authority, we have the ability to do some things with the Ohio Department of Transportation that we would be willing to do as long as X, Y, and Z. And that's why I'm glad we're having this meeting. We just got to get the X, Y, Z figured out. From our perspective, I don't have a problem writing a letter of support saying, at this preliminary stage, Ohio Department of Natural Resources, we are excited to enthusiastically support Mr. Berridge's grant application, assuming that all parties involved can come to a meeting of the minds. So that would be our stance. We're excited. I'll reserve my opinion of how the government sometimes throws money at things, but it appears that we've been, in this Appalachian community, been plagued by a lot of these mining issues. This is the government's effort, apparently, to try to remedy some of those problems. And if we can get, a better economic development platform, better recreation for our children, and flood mitigation for the city of Jackson, certainly we're all for that. I think the devil is in the details, and we're working through that now from my perspective. Is that fair enough, Paul?
Fair enough.
Question?
Yes, thank you, Pat.
Actually, it's for Paul. Is the letter of support that he's describing something similar to what you're asking for from city council?
Yes, I'm asking for the full support of council to
Because there was a lot
make
of,
this application.
there was a lot of ifs in his, you know, I mean, is that going to be enough?
Oh, no, I would like support, a lot of the football coaches have been working on trying to figure out some layout of different, well, baseball coaches, I should say, and I think some football coaches. We're trying to figure out the layout, and I think it's after the grant application goes in and we have totaled up all the different areas that we're asking for funding, we need to have some meetings and try to get together on how we can lay this out and how we can put as many things in it as we can that will benefit us for the amount of money that we have.
Well, Mr. Ball described more like a letter of support of the,
Yeah,
but not very specific. And is that what you need from council? I'm asking
possibly
for
a
them. I'm asking for them.
resolution to Gwen that you are in support of providing improved ball fields, allowing flood mitigation to take place. And we're not going to solve the flooding problem. I don't want to mislead you on that. What we're going to do is reduce the amount of flooding that would take place on a 100-year flood. We're going to be reducing that considerably. Well, we could go into that more in detail in public meetings.
I was just trying to find out for council more specifically what it is you're asking for.
Resolution of support from city council that you are in favor of these improvements for the city. I would also like you to be able to contact the EPA for the environmental assessment to see when we can get that scheduled. I have no idea how long it's going to take to do an environmental assessment. I've never, always before ODNR has done all this for the reclamation work, but they've collected severance tax from mining since the late 70s. They've sent literally billions of dollars over to Washington, D.C., and it got thrown in the general fund. Then they would dole back a little bit to the states over the years. The state of Ohio might get $3 million one year, $4 million another year, $2 million another year, when they had this tremendous pot. But it was all on paper because as soon as they got it in the general fund, they spent it. But now they've put together a funding source and give it back to the state. The state was able to win a considerable amount of money, not an infinite amount. But they were looking at projects that would do not only surface reclamation, but would also do some economic benefit for the community and community benefit as well. And that's where we happen to fit right in what they were looking for. So they contacted me. I talked to them 20 years ago. They contacted me again about this new source of money. It's not a certainty. We're making our application. I understand from talking to Rural Action, who was the one basically that was doing the work for us in getting the letters and stuff written. Rural Action says that they have received probably about $4 requests for every dollar they have available. So the application that we put in, I think we stand a good chance of getting something. I don't know if we'll get all of it or part of it this year, part of it next year. We'll have to see.
Mr. Reed.
I guess my question on it, as far as the properties, you're saying it's possibly given to the Port Authority or sold to the Port Authority then?
My portion of the property will be sold to the Port Authority. They don't have any money, so we're doing it on a dollar transfer sale. If at some point in the future I'm willing to take the chance, there is an economic development. There have been a lot of suggestions what could go in on both sides of Walmart Street over there. When the land is developed, it has water, sewer, gas, adequate electric, everything is in place. I think there'll be quite a bit of interest in it. At that time, they can negotiate if they want to with the party that buys it, and they can reimburse as part of that transaction what they would owe me for the whole property.
Well, I guess we got this same situation happened when I was on council 20-some years ago, and that was with the swamp property down there. There was a quick deal where it was coming to council, something didn't pass, Hillsborough didn't get it, it came to us. We had one night to vote on it or not vote on it. At that evening, in the agreement was there was property along what is now Veterans Drive that we could sell. If we sold it, then we could sell it above this amount of money, and there was property over on Longworth that stayed with you. That all worked. You got the money for all of the property in the swamp, I'll say. And then when we did the substation, that was purchased, the city had to purchase that property. The only one really made out on that deal was you.
I did make out on the deal, but I had given the city a deal where the initial purchase of the price was a loan on my part of about $300,000. I then took $200,000 back for the substation, and I included the rest of the land that was around it in that deal as part of what I gave to the city. Yes, sir.
Other questions?
I mean, that's kind of where I am with it. We can support it, but if we're going to support it, it needs to be public property, not private property.
It has to be public property.
Okay.
Can we hear from Mr. Brady then also?
Can we, Paul can let Sam speak, and then we got all the parties here.
Evening. So, for those of you new faces here who have never met me, I'm Sam Brady. I'm the president of the Jackson County Economic Development Partnership. And you see, you have a letter on our letterhead that I want to make clear. This was simply issued basically as a placeholder letter issued on behalf of the community that there could be a full application in this round of funding on behalf of a combination of perhaps our office, the City of Jackson, or the Port Authority. To echo or kind of clarify on what Mr. Peters just asked, as well as Mr. Baird responded to, either our office, the Port Authority, or the City of Jackson has to be the applicant and actually own this project. Now, there could be a room for a partnership, but one of those three entities need to own it. Now, I will be honest, our office does not have the capacity at this time to actually take on and manage this project. We can certainly help administer it. We have committed to that, and we're happy to do so, happy to support it. But this will either need to be owned by the Port Authority or the city going forward for a full application.
Questions?
Is any of this land outside the city limits? 'Cause I know part of Longworth is in the township and not in the city corporation limits.
My understanding was that all of the land is in the city.
Well, there is part of Longworth at the end that's outside the city yet.
On this side along with?
So,
I wasn't aware of that. I thought it was outside the city. I thought it was inside the city. It may be that I will need to talk to the county commissioners as well.
And this is an incredible opportunity. I know the City of Wellston is really taking advantage of this with their own ball fields and recreation spaces. I think this is a great opportunity to create a recreation space that will certainly be an economic driver for not just Jackson, but the whole community. The visibility there on US 35, be certainly a huge carrot to the thousands of cars that go up and down 35 every day to see exactly the recreation and progress this community could make in the future.
Sam, the Wellston project, who's owning it, do you know?
The city of Wellston owns their recreation space. They actually lease it to make Wellston.
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
Other questions? Thanks, Sam.
Have one more. So as far as a grant funding, if, let's say, the city says, yes, this is something we would like to participate in, before the funding would come for it, that would all have to be settled as far as we would be running the grants, administering the grants. Would we have to own the property that we're using the grants on? That's what, or is that's what I was trying to clarify, who is going to be and how is that going to be?
It is my understanding, and this should not be treated as gospel, it is my understanding that, this grant could potentially purchase the property, in which case it will become public at that point. Whether it be purchased for the Port Authority or purchased for the city of Jackson, that's to be decided.
The grant would purchase the property.
Correct.
I know this isn't Robert's Rule of Order, so I can step back up to the microphone, but, we're indifferent. I mean, I think sometimes too many chefs spoil the soup. We're happy we have no paid staff, so it's a little frustrating for me to hear Sam say they lack the capacity. We certainly don't have the capacity to administer this grant. I do agree with him that Wellston has benefited greatly from a very similar type situation. And if we can bring to bear resources, we certainly want to do that. But I believe in the project, and I'm less concerned about who owns the property at the end of the day.
And let me, thank you for bringing that, let me clarify, we can certainly help administer the grant and, the back end pieces of it. We just simply cannot run and own the project at this time.
Who makes the determination on the sale value, Paul?
That's about another $1,250 part of it. It has to be a commercial appraisal.
Was that appraised value after it's completed or is it the appraised value as it is now?
I'm not absolutely certain about which way it is. I know it's based on its location, and that's the important factor of the location and access. But I was informed that the state would require an appraisal, a certified independent appraisal. But none of this stuff they're going to pay for up front. So we have to figure out a way to get it done on our own. They used to do all of it. They used to do everything. Initially, when I first started talking to them, they were going to come down, approve the project. Then it was going to go back to rural action. Rural action was going to develop a project plan, and ODNR was going to do the actual engineering work on it. But they've got so many projects now, they don't want to do the engineering work. So they want to do a design-build type of project for getting the money out there into the communities.
And I believe Rural Action actually has administered Wellston's project for them.
Yes, well, rural action is involved.
Mr. Ondara?
I guess my question is more like Mr. Swackham, I'm not sure I understand the purchase price of the property, whoever is going to own it. You said the property is going to be commercially appraised. The purchase.
Appraised to determine the purchase price for the property, that what we've asked for is fair in the grant application. And the state won't pay any more than whatever that appraised price is. It will be owned, my plan is at this point that it will be owned by the Port Authority solely, and the disposition of it after that, if the Port Authority wants to deed it to the city, or they want to hold it in some way, however they want to do it. We've talked to a lot of the coaches, they want to run the programs. They're talking about putting in some good quality restrooms, which requires more than just a holding tank type of restrooms that we have in our ball fields now. They want some good quality facilities, and they want a concession stand, and they want to be able to isolate it from the possibility of turning into a homeless shelter camp for the druggies. And we should not be in any way at the mercy of those people who want to tear down our community. I think we should be looking at building up our kids, doing what's good for the future.
Yeah, I'm still not clear. We've kind of moved away from the actual question. The question is, the property is going to be commercially appraised before whoever buys it, not not for what it's worth at the end of the day. Obviously, that's what the grant's all about. But the actual purchase price of the property, whether that's the city of Jackson, whether it's the Port Authority, whoever it is, that is going to come as it is, a wetland, correct?
Yeah, very poor quality wetland, yes. Full of gob, material from the mines. Someone asked me what gob is. Well, when you dig an underground mine, it's everything that's not sold as coal. Everything that comes out of the mine and is disposed of. There's thousands of yards of gob in there that's filling up inside. They're invasive species of different cattails that do not make a good wetland. If we can get it down to native soil, dry it up, plant trees that are used to saturated soil, we'll have a nice quality wetland when it's done.
Right, but the purchase price is going to come prior to all that.
They're not buying the city's portion. The city already owns the central portion of that land. The only thing they have talked about buying is the outer part of it on behalf of the Port Authority.
So Pat, are you guys able to maintain that land?
No, I mean, we don't have any resources.
The Port Authority has the ability to do certain projects, but they don't have any money. How they want to dispose of the property and handle the property as far as management with the baseball coaches, with the city of Jackson, the recreation department, I think can be worked out. Should be worked out. We're not trying to hide anything from you, try to keep it. And I don't know exactly how you contact I did one once when I sold ground to the city, and they gave an appraised value for it. I didn't sell it to the city, I sold it to the state, and the state in turn gave it to the city. That's a major part of that. Didn't know that the dangerous mine shafts were in such a condition as at that time, but now I've done some research into them, and I know what kind of shape they are in. They were originally dug, the entry shafts, the air shafts, and when the mining was finished, they were capped with wood and covered with dirt. Some of them have fallen in, some of them haven't.
So, so when's the application due, or is there a time?
Application is due the 15th on or before the 16th of September. I said the 15th because we want to try to get it.
And would that application show a breakdown of the
Quite a detail.
$7 million or something? So when could we see that, or when could council see that? That would show how much is set aside in the grant, at least to purchase land, I would think.
Well, yeah, it will
I
all be a public record the moment it's submitted, and I can show you that as soon as we get it put together.
I mean, I think if you would show council the application, you'd be more likely to get a letter of support from them for that application, rather than a lot of kind of unanswered questions there, it seems
Well,
like.
I can show you at the next meeting the application as it exists at that point, and all the engineering work that has gone into coming up with the proposed amounts for sewer, water, and everything else.
I mean, I would think that could lead to maybe getting the letter of support that you're asking them for.
But I need that support to go in for the application. So I can do that by the next council meeting.
That would be the 22nd. August 22nd will be our next meeting.
Would there be any problem in providing the support, though, from council when I bring that in to you and show you, or are you going to say, well, we need another council meeting to look it over and 2 or 3 meetings to pass an ordinance? Can we do it as an emergency?
I mean, they always have that right. So,
Oh, okay, thank you.
Joe says yes. I mean, so I certainly am not going to speak for council, but, you know, as the way they feel, but I would say that's plausible. But if we could see, I think what
Is
Mr.
there-
Mayor Evans is asking for, I think it would help.
Is there any opposition to doing these improvements? Is there something that I should be aware of? Do you not want any of that?
I'll speak for myself. I don't think we need to be purchasing any more property. That's just where I am. It's a great project, but sounds like we need to commit to purchase property before everything could be granted it, you know.
You don't need to purchase it.
But I think about three times we've asked, and they can't purchase it. They don't have any money. They have no.
Oh, the Port Authority can purchase, so they just don't have any funds to pay for it.
Right, but
So if the
where I
state
am
pays
is
for it,
okay. So
and it gives it to the Port Authority.
okay, I don't think the city should be purchasing any property without something being a done deal. That's just where I'm at.
So hopefully, if you could come back on the 22nd, we'll bring the application, possibly disseminate a little bit more of the plan with the Port Authority. I think we're a little, and possibly it's just me, in a little bit of a gray area, trying to understand how this goes from $1 to the Port Authority to the end where it has
There are
been
two
valued
options.
and sold.
There's
And
two
so,
options. If the state does not fund it, as far as purchasing it, then I would sell it to the Port Authority for $1. So the Port Authority will own the land, but they will have a lease agreement with me that will be released at some point as the land is developed and if there are commercial or industrial sites sold off of the land.
Okay.
Otherwise, it will be paid for by the state. Now, I can't tell you which way it's gonna go because, like I said, there's about $4 asking for every dollar that's available.
Right.
We won't know until we get the application in and they evaluate it.
well, we will look forward to seeing you on the 22nd.
Hope I've answered your questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That is the only one, Mr. Berridge was the only one we had to sign up to speak this evening, so we'll move on to the next part of the agenda, which is the approval of the minutes that are in your packet. Is there any objections or corrections to the minutes as presented to council this evening? Hearing none, the chair would entertain a motion to accept them. Mr. Bob, is there a second? Mr. Crabtree, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. The motion is carried. Next on the agenda is our committee reports. We'll start with utility. Mr. Ondera?
No report.
Thank you, Mr. Ondera. Budget and finance, Ms. Colby?
No report.
Thank you, Ms. Colby. Police, fire, and traffic, Mr. Foster?
No report.
Thank you, Mr. Foster. And service, Mr. Peters?
No report.
Thank you, Mr. Peters. Next on the agenda, the auditor's report, Mr. Reed?
I really have no report. There's several items dealing with budget for this year. Mr. Blackhammer and I have been working on in the packet. The gap conversion has been issued, turned into the state today, which was a big milestone for our office, getting things rolling. We're rolling right now into the audit for 21. So we're moving along. So that was a lot of pressure off our office.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Reed. Mr. Kirby?
Have no report.
Chief Hinch?
There is a stat sheet in your packet. I'll just bring everybody attention to it at some point and take a look at that. July was the busiest month that we've had all year.
Yeah, I did see that.
Somewhat normal, but that's all I'm gonna report this time.
Thank you, Chief. Appreciate it. Mayor's report, Mayor Evans?
My entire report will be given to you and very lengthy in the executive session that you see just down the agenda here.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Swackhammer?
Yeah, I got a few items to go over. In your package, you will see a memorandum increasing the city's towing, impounding, and retrieval of vehicle, change in fees. They haven't been updated since 2004. even with the increases, they're still well below ORC, and I just wanted to share that as informational with council. Also, the four-way traffic pattern changes that we all talked about and agreed upon several months ago. All the supplies have came in for that. We'll be starting to set some posts in concrete, hopefully later this week. And then we'll start hanging the stop signs. The lights, the traffic lights that will be coming out will be left in. They'll all be put on a four-way red flasher. So probably up until after the Apple Festival, we'll leave it in that manner. That way, out-of-town visitors and so forth to the city will have the benefit of both the stop signs and the flashers before we then go back and pull the traffic lights out. I also will have in the new business, there's going to be some requests for some utilities outside the city that I'll share with you at that time. And I do need to request a zoning board of appeals meeting for Iron City Pipe and Supply on a sign. And I believe Ms. Kuhn and Mr. Ondero, have you guys spoke about it already?
Yeah, 6:30.
6:30 next meeting?
Right. 22nd.
Second?
Okay, so 6:30 next meeting, we will do the zoning board of appeals for that. Updates on some of the construction work. Morton Street curbing is done now. We will be starting down East Broadway, pulling the curb out and replacing some curbing down East Broadway in preparation for the paving of East Broadway. Most of our uptown areas are now repaired, ready for the 93, 139 West paving. That is still on schedule to be completed by the end of this month. It's the last we've heard from both ODOT and Shelley and Sands. And the traffic signal project, you've probably seen them at different intersections, digging holes, tearing up, and setting bases. They should be out of here in the next week or so also, because they have to be done before the paving can begin. That's all I have.
Thank you. Questions for Mr. Swackhammer? Thank you, Mr. Swackhammer. Mr. Peters?
Yeah, Mr. President, I move that we move to executive session for the purpose of preparing for conducting or reviewing negotiations or bargaining sessions with public employees concerning their compensation or other terms and conditions of employment. Everyone at the table here is invited to stay, and I'm assuming Mr. Esposito will be staying as well.
Is there a second? Mr. Ondero, second?
Foster. Ondera.
Yes.
Colby. Yes. Peters.
Yes.
Newkirk. Crabtree. Bop.
Motion carried. We'll adjourn. Okay, I think we're back now from executive session. So we will move into the ordinances and resolution portion of the evening. We will begin with the third reading, I believe, of ordinance 2922. Ms. Kuhn?
An ordinance rezoning from industrial I to O, property owned by the Jackson Historical Society and located at 320 East Broadway in the city of Jackson, Ohio, and declaring an emergency.
Discussion? Hearing none, Ms. Kuhn?
Foster.
Yes.
Andera.
Yes.
Colby.
Yes.
Peters.
Yes.
Newkirk. Crabtree. Bop.
Ordinance 2922 is duly adopted. Next, on the page would be ordinance 3222. Listed would be third,
No, this is
first reading, I'm sorry. Yes. Ms. Kuhn?
An ordinance to revise the codified ordinances by adopting current replacement pages thereto and declaring an emergency.
I have a motion to accept ordinance 3222 as presented to council this evening. Mr. Peters, is there a second? Mr. Bach? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. The motion is carried. Discussion.
Mr. President, just assuming we see these quite a bit, this is just getting us in line with ORC.
Mr. Kirby?
Did my email go through? Someone said it may
Went to
not have.
spam.
Okay, my
Mine
email went to
did.
spam. So normally you're correct. This puts everything in line with what the state code changes. If DUIs go from .1 to .08, this incorporates that. You mentioned at the, right before July 4th, council mentioned that, are you allowed to have fireworks in Jackson? Gee, the city ordinance in Jackson still says you're not allowed to have fireworks. And when I checked online, or published online, they've jumped the gun a bit. They've already made these changes online. I'm not going to fix that, but I wanted to point out, if you just pass this, this makes fireworks legal just like it is throughout the state. You may or may not want that, but I thought I wanted to send an email, which obviously didn't go, that points out that your, whatever you do here actually changes what you want to do on fireworks.
And that's the 1519?
That's the 15, 19, 4, 7, and 8. The others are, I don't know if that was anything that was discussed before. If you want to look at those, I wanted to be able to print what we had before off, but they had already changed it online. It's not required to pass today. Our ordinances stay the way it is. But if you do pass this, keep in mind that fireworks are now in line with the state.
So we can pass on first reading, but then we could amend to second?
So if you want to take out, if you want to amend it to take out fireworks or anything like that, you can just strike this through. And then I've told American Legal Publishing that we'll note that, they'll be aware of it. If you want to think about what you want to do with fireworks, you're not obligated to suspend rules or pass this today.
Mr. Peters?
Mr. President, I mean, the other one, under the general offenses, there seems to be some important things there, like carrying concealed weapons, properly handling firearms and motor vehicle. Can we just strike the fire prevention portion of it and pass it through?
Yes. Yeah. You
Because I think I mean, I'm speaking for myself, I think we should just leave the fireworks illegal part in town, right? Like, do we want to just open that up and say, hey,
Well, they do
I think it's open anyways. I don't think it makes a bit of difference.
That's true.
I just let it, I just pass it as it is and let's go with the state.
let it be done?
Well, there might be other changes in here, though, that aren't in ours too, that we want to make sure we comply with.
All right, that's my thing. I just want to make sure we're doing it.
And I don't know, I mean, I agree with John, I don't know why we want to be different from the state, because obviously we don't enforce it anyway. So, it's just my 2 cents. I would just go with this.
Yep.
But,
For what it's worth, the
Yeah.
publishing company said that these are never ever hot topics at all, but fireworks are kind of hot topics statewide, so. Yeah, there we go.
Other discussion? Is there any other action to be taken on ordinance 3222?
Possibly, Mr. President. I mean, it's everybody shaking their heads, like we should just go ahead and.
Motion to suspend the rules?
By Mr. Andera, is there a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Peters, second. Discussion? Ms. Kuhn?
Foster.
yes?
Andera.
Yes.
Colby.
Yes.
Peters.
Yes.
Newkirk. Crabtree.
Yes.
Bop.
Yes.
Any other discussion? Ms. Kuhn?
Foster.
Yes.
Andera.
Yes.
Colby.
Yes.
Peters.
Yes.
Newkirk. Crabtree.
Yes.
Bop.
Ordinance 3222 is duly adopted. Next, we will look at ordinance 3322. Ms. Kuhn?
An ordinance approving additional appropriations for Parkview, Maine sanitary sewer project and declaring an emergency.
Is there a motion to accept ordinance 3222 as presented to council this evening? Mr. Peters? Is there a second? Mr. Andera? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. And the motion is carried. Discussion. Mr. Reed?
Okay, I'll handle this one and the next one. Several years ago, we advanced out of 7-Eleven funds to do the Parkview to Main Sewer project, and we also did lift station upgrades. And when we say an advance out, we took the money, borrowed it from that fund, and are supposed to put it back as we get the monies repaid to us. So we paid the money up front, then we got grant monies that came back in. This is part of that money, and the next ordinance moves it all back but $74,000 back to the fund. So this has to be done first, and then the next ordinance that you'll see moves some money back to the 7-Eleven to the sewer fund.
Thank you, Mr. Reed. Other discussion?
Motion to suspend the rules to.
Motion by Mr. Peters to suspend the rules, second by Mr. Andera. Discussion? Ms. Kuhn?
Foster.
Yes.
Andera.
Yes.
Colby.
Yes.
Peters.
Yes.
Newkirk. Crabtree. Bop.
Any discussion? Ms. Kuhn?
Foster.
Yes.
Andera.
Yes.
Colby.
Yes.
Peters. Newkirk. Crabtree. Bop.
Yes.
Ordinance 3322 is duly adopted. Next for our consideration is ordinance 3422. Ms. Kuhn?
An ordinance for reimbursement of prior advancements from the sewer fund and declaring an emergency.
Is there a motion to accept ordinance 3422 as presented to council this evening? Mr. Peters, is there a second? Ms. Colby? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Discussion, Mr. Reed.
Okay, this is the second half of, those are project numbers, the 44, 49, and 4050 for the two projects. If you get down to section 2, you have to be specific as far as what money was not being, since it was advanced out, you're supposed to advance in, you would normally advance in the same amount of money had you got it all. The 74,000 was part of the city's match, so that's what we ended up not receiving. So the money being advanced back is minus that amount, and that's why it's in this ordinance and listed that way. So we had originally advanced out $1 million. Now that's what's short here, and this money then is going back to the 7-Eleven to the sewer fund.
Thank you, Mr. Reed. Other discussion?
Motion to suspend the rules.
Motion by Mr. Peters to suspend the rules, second by Mr. Andera. Discussion? Ms. Kuhn?
Foster.
Yes.
Andera.
Yes.
Colby.
Yes.
Peters.
Yes.
Newkirk. Crabtree. Bop.
Other discussion? Ms. Kuhn?
Foster.
Yes.
Andera.
Yes.
Colby.
Yes.
Peters.
Yes.
Newkirk. Crabtree. Bop.
Ordinance 3422 is duly adopted. Excuse me. Next for council's consideration is ordinance 3522. Ms. Kuhn?
An ordinance modifying appropriations within the cemetery fund and declaring an emergency.
Is there a motion to accept ordinance 3522 as presented to council this evening? Mr. Newkirk, is there a second? Second by Mr. Peters. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Discussion. Mr. Swackhammer.
Yes. Everyone is feeling the hit of the fuel increases this year, as you can imagine. So there's going to be several of our departments that are short their budget for fuel. So rather than just increasing it, going to general fund, we're looking within the department to where there are still line items that we can move funds for to cover these needs, rather than just general fund money into it. So this is one for actually the cemetery. I'll be honest, there's going to be another one for street and alley coming in the not-so-distant future. Just fuel costs, nobody could project this type of an increase. So that's why this one's here. I'll ask you to consider going ahead and passing it tonight too, so we can continue operations.
Other discussion?
Motion to suspend the rules.
Mr. Ondera, is there a second? Mr. Bob? Discussion? Ms. Kuhn?
Foster. Ondera.
Yes.
Colby.
Yes.
Peters.
Yes.
Newkirk.
Yes.
Crabtree.
Yes.
Bob.
Discussion? Ms. Kuhn?
Foster. Ondera.
Yes.
Colby.
Yes.
Peters.
Yes.
Newkirk.
Yes.
Crabtree.
Yes.
Bob.
Ordinance 3522 is duly adopted. Next, we will start in the resolutions, and we will begin with Resolution 3022 on first reading. Ms. Kuhn?
Resolution authorizing the city to enter into an agreement between the City of Jackson, Ohio and Rumpke of Ohio Incorporated for landfill services and declaring an emergency.
Is there a motion to accept Resolution 3022 as presented to council this evening? Mr. Peters, is there a second? Mr. Newkirk, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion is carried. Discussion, Mr. Swackhammer.
Yes, our contract with Rumpke does run out at the end of September. Normally, our contracts have ran from September to October to September. There was a significant increase this year. Again, with Rumpke, their rates is based upon the inflation in a lot of areas. But they were going from, as you can see, if you'll look here, from $33.96 per ton to $39.96, a $6 increase per ton. What I asked Rumpke to consider is get us off of that October 1st date where we're coming into fourth quarter of budget, and we didn't budget for those type of increases, to get us on a fiscal cycle January 1st to December 30th, like most budgets are. They agreed to keep their current rates through the end of this year, for which we budgeted for, but the other rates would go in effect on January 1st and run through December of next year. They only want to do a one-year agreement, only because they're still concerned about the volatility of the economy right now, and don't want to foresee 3 years down the pike. So that's all they've offered us, is in this case a 15-month. Originally, it was going to be a 12-month from October 1st to September 30th. We looked at other options, other landfills. If you figure in travel time, you're going to be upside down for fuel costs, so forth. There's no rush. If you want time to look at it, we got plenty of time. Resolution, we can go 3 readings with no problem and still meet our September 30th contract obligation.
Mr. President.
Yes, sir, Mr. Ondera.
Is there, I'm assuming that most of this increase is based on fuel costs. Maybe it's not, but that's my thought. I
Fuel and
just wa-
equipment both, actually. They're
Okay.
having trouble getting parts, and what they are getting is actually increased in cost also.
I'm wondering if there's not a possibility of getting, you know, a fuel adjustment, you know, since the fact that it's only a one-year contract, if there's a possibility of just, you know, getting a fuel increase alone rather than, you know, this $6 a ton. I don't know, it's just a thought. I don't know what your thoughts are about that.
I would be glad to go back and entertain something with the Rumpke folks to see what their thoughts on that are. Like I said, we've got time, if that's something we want to do.
Mr. Peters?
What, I don't know how many tons we dump. What does this do to our rate that is being charged for the customer? What does that do?
Yeah, good question. For budgeting, we will have to go back and look at our average over the last couple of years on tonnage, see what this does to that. Also take into consideration any wage increases plus the fuel increase to see what that does to our current garbage rates that we have on our public.
Maybe we can get those, some kind of figure by next meeting, and we can hold this to,
Yeah, I mean, we've got plenty of time to hold it.
Another
There's no
reason.
rush on it.
Hearing none, this constitutes the first reading of Resolution 3022. Next, for consideration, would be Resolution 3122. Ms. Coon?
A resolution accepting fact-finding award regarding the negotiations between the City of Jackson, Jackson County, Ohio, and OPSI ASME Local 4 AFL-CIO Local 410 and declaring an emergency.
Is there a motion to accept Resolution 3122 as presented to council this evening? Mr. Ondera, is there a second? Mr. Peters, second? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion is carried. Discussion.
Motion to suspend the rules?
Motion by Mr. Ondera to suspend the rules. Is there a second? Mr. Bob, seconds. Any discussion? Ms. Kuhn?
Foster.
Yes.
Ondera.
Yes.
Colby.
Yes.
Peters.
Yes.
Newkirk.
Yes.
Crabtree.
Yes.
Bop.
Discussion. Ms. Kuhn?
Foster.
Yes.
Ondera.
Yes.
Colby.
Yes.
Peters.
Yes.
Newkirk. Crabtree.
Yes.
Bop.
Resolution 3122 is duly adopted. Next, we will look at Resolution 3422.
3222?
Aha. Oh, I don't. There it is. I'm sorry. I apologize. Resolution 3222. Ms. Kuhn?
Resolution accepting the amounts and rates as determined by the Budget Commission and authorizing the necessary tax levies and certifying them to the county auditor and declaring an emergency.
Is there a motion to accept Resolution 3222 as presented to council? Ms. Colby, is there a second? Mr. Bach, second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion is carried. Discussion. Mr. Reed.
This is just it's basically a formality. We need to approve it for, the Budget Commission does it in the county, so we just need to pass it for us. It's a formality for us. We don't control it.
Discussion.
Mr. President, it says by September 30th, so I'll move to suspend the rules.
Motion by Mr. Peters to suspend the rules. Is there a second? Ms. Colby? Second. Other discussion? Ms. Kuhn?
Foster.
Yes.
Ondera.
Yes.
Colby.
Yes.
Peters.
Yes.
Newkirk. Crabtree.
Yes.
Bop.
Other discussion? Ms. Kuhn?
Foster.
Yes.
Ondera.
Yes.
Colby.
Yes.
Peters.
Yes.
Newkirk. Crabtree. Bop.
Resolution 3222 is duly adopted. Next, We will move to Resolution 3422.
Mr. President, is there any reason we don't have 3322, or is that an issue?
I think in the wording that has come about, it would be 3422.
33
30,
was the
33
That
was a
were
rejection.
the
That we
rejection
were.
that were not.
Okay.
We can,
I didn't know if it had to be in that sequence. That's all, my only question.
Do we want to renumber Resolution 34?
We can renumber to make this, in that sequence, to make it 3322, because we will not be considering
using
that
33.
as it is written, so we can make this one 3322.
You don't have to,
I mean-
you can do that, or you can just say for,
I mean, I can just mark through it though, or
Mark through what?
the number.
Yes, you can change the number, or you can just treat it as if it's a 33 is not ever been presented and you skip over it, so you can do either way.
We will mark this as 3322, this resolution.
Again, the archiving of resolutions that would seem like it would make it easier.
A resolution accepting tentative agreement regarding the negotiations between the City of Jackson, Jackson County, Ohio, and Ascony, Ohio Council 8, AFL-CIO Local 3619, and declaring an emergency.
Chair would like to have a motion to accept Resolution 3322 as presented to council. Mr. Ondera, is there a second? Mr. Newkirk? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Discussion.
Motion to suspend the rules?
Mr. Ondera made motion to suspend the rules. Is there a second? Mr. Newkirk? Any other discussion? Ms. Kuhn?
Foster.
Yes.
Ondera.
Yes.
Colby. Yes. Peters.
Yes.
Newkirk.
Yes.
Crabtree. Bob.
Other discussion? Ms. Kuhn?
Foster.
Yes.
Ondera.
Yes.
Colby. Yes. Peters.
Yes.
Newkirk.
Yes.
Crabtree.
Yes.
Bob.
Resolution 3322 is duly adopted. Thank you, council. Next on our agenda is correspondence, and I don't believe we have any this evening to bring forward to council. So is there any old business that is on council's mind that they want to discuss? Hearing none, we will discuss new business. There is a request for an electric and water tap outside the city. Mr. Schweckhammer.
yes, Sean and Melissa Sexton had made 2 requests for water and electric for properties outside the city. The water would come off of Smithbridge Road, and the electric would come off of Chillicothe, close to where the, what's the cleanup place out there?
Smithbridge Road on the...
Oh, ServPro.
ServPro, yeah, the building behind ServPro. Right now, there's one single trailer sitting on the hill that belongs to the Sextons. They're looking at putting 2 more residents up there. Electric would come off of where the current trailer is receiving electric, and the water taps would be made available off of Smithbridge. We are not running water to the property. He's got agreements with the property owners, because he does not own that. He's got agreements with them to run those 2 lines back to that property. So it's just for us to provide service at the Smithbridge Road.
Is there a motion to accept this proposal for the Sexton property there on Chillicothe Pike?
Can I ask a question before?
Sure, absolutely.
Like, so we've already checked out everything, everything's good to go, and
Yep.
he's put the bill for whatever is happening on his side.
It's just taps on the water, because we're not running it anyplace, and the electric is coming off the same pole that we already have service running off of to the other residents that's on that piece of property.
I accept that.
Motion to accept, is there a second? Mr. Bob seconds. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. The motion is carried. The other piece that was listed for new business, there was the, discussion, I believe, is just the implementation of the new fees for towing, impounding, and retrieval of vehicles. No vote is needed for that this evening. Is there any other new business to be brought before council?
One item.
Mr. Foster.
Mr. Swackhammer, they set most of the posts today for the stop signs, so they may be able to get the signs up to the end of the week.
They were even set for a minimum of 2 days.
Yeah.
The signage was oversized signage, a little bit bigger than normal. And at the time that the signs were mounted on the post, we would at that time put those lights on a 4-way red flash to line up, and we would leave them that way. Right now, we're looking at leaving them until after the Apple Festival.
Right. I just wasn't aware if you knew that they were setting the post.
I knew they were this week. I was in negotiations.
And I noticed at least 2 minutes.
Yep.
Other new business?
I just have a quick question about the project that we started the meeting off with, what is actually happening?
Which
I
project?
was very confused
Paul
by
Berry.
most of the, because like it seemed like everyone asked questions, but none of the questions were answered. So, just so I'm clear, I know everyone's gone, Mr. Barrage is trying to work up some sort of agreement where he's gonna give it to you for $1, but he's gonna charge you for it later. Is that what, is that what he was saying, or?
Well, that's why when Mr. Bridge approached me last week, I sent out the email that I did to the county commissioners, to the Port Authority, Jackson County Economic Development, and council, because as Pat Ball mentioned, Port Authority has no money. They have no money to maintain this land. They have no money to purchase this land. If there isn't a grant given here for that, there's no funds available. Even if there is, the question is, who owns it afterwards? Who's going to manage it? And who makes a decision on the actual value? I know they said it would be a commercial appraisal, but I think your question, Mr. Ondero, was, is that appraisal of today's value as it sits right now?
Why wouldn't it be?
Or after the investment of
He did not answer that question.
running all the city utilities and infrastructure throughout the property? Mr. Reed.
That was my question originally to him. If the property is appraised at what it's worth after a $7 million grant is spent on it,
Right.
and then he's compensated at state value, you're improving your property with a city grant, or however you want to look at it, and then we end up with a project. I'm not saying it's a bad deal. I'm just saying,
It would be a bad deal if that was the case.
for who?
Huh? For the city, if we had to pay for the property after it was
Right.
already done.
Oh, look how pretty it is. Okay, well, you owe us $5 million now.
Well, he's saying, basically, on the other aspect, that the grant money would be used to buy the property. So depending on which way it went, either way, there's 2 options there.
But it looks like a real clear winner to me in the whole transaction.
Right. And that's what happened years ago on the swamp, basically, over there.
Well, if they bring in the application, I think that'll become more clear what kind of money they're planning to budget to purchase the land.
It would be a really great deal for us to partner with those other 2 groups and not have a private citizen involved.
Well, it's his property, and he's the one after the grant to make his property valuable to sell it.
Well, and you heard from both the other 2 parties that neither of them have the infrastructure to manage this project. So the management's either going to come back on the city or on to Mr. Berridge.
According to the map, we own like half of the proposed area, or am I wrong? It's hard to read, but.
Well over half.
Yeah, well over half.
So why can't we just go go get our own grant and implement what we want to do with it.
Because everything that we own is floodplain below level, and they're wanting to take the mine reclamation piece to build up the outer edge of the property, which most of what he owns is out of the floodplain, to bring up more out of the floodplain to build these sites on.
Okay. That's all I had.
All right, sounds like a great project, but like I said, I don't want to get stuck with the,
No, with
I don't want to get
bill.
stuck with the bill, but this, I mean, this looks really good on paper. I'd love to see something built down there.
I'd like to see the flood.
I mean, you see a lot of cities, you drive by, you know, cities off the highway, look down there, and they got really nice ball fields and all back to back in a clover leaf.
So, I would say that, just to remind you that we'll have a zoning meeting, zoning
6:30.
committee meeting, correct? At 6:30 on the 22nd. So that will be on the website. And then I suspect that Mr. Berridge will be back to council to speak to us on the 22nd about this also. So, is there any other new business? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Mr. Bob, second by Mr. Peters. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carried, 9:20.